Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. This is Professor Pega Matalov speaking. I'm so excited to begin our evening tonight, late afternoon, I guess. It's still light out where I am, but I'm super excited to have this amazing speaker and poet with us tonight. But first, before anything, I would like to acknowledge that it is Native American Heritage Month, and I would like to begin our program by reading some land acknowledgements. At this time, we want to take a moment to reflect on the lands on which we reside. We're coming from many places, and we want to acknowledge the ancestral homelands and traditional territories of Indigenous peoples who have been here since time immemorial, and to recognize that we must continue to build our solidarity and kinship with Native people across Americas and across the globe. San Diego Mesa College is based in San Diego, California, and we acknowledge and honor the people of the Kumeyaay Nation. We also acknowledge that this country would not exist if it wasn't for the free enslaved labor of Black people. Black Lives Matter. And for your reference, I will put these land acknowledgements in the chat in case you want to read them and reflect on them on your own. Next, I would like to give a few minutes to Professor Scott Starbuck to acknowledge his students who are here. And also I want to thank Professor Scott Starbuck for reaching out to my call to invite his creative writing students, especially around our poet and her work, and also around the subject of her work. So Professor Starbuck, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and say a few words if you like.
Thank you, Pega and Noor, for having this event. Noor, I greatly enjoyed your poems when I read them, especially the ones at Poetry Magazine. And to my 249A Intro to Creative Writing students, thanks so much for being here. I always like to have you hear from a visiting writer, and this is a special opportunity for that. And also a shout out of thanks to my 245AB creative nonfiction writers who made time to attend this event today.
Yes, thank you very much. And we have the Q&A portion of Zoom available. So as you are listening to our incredible poet speak tonight, feel free to type in questions and comments, and then we will make time to acknowledge them as well. So I would like to take a moment to introduce our honorable poet tonight. Noor Hindi, she, her, is a Palestinian American poet and reporter. Her poems have appeared or are forthcoming in Poetry, Hobart, and Jubilat. Her essays have appeared or are forthcoming in American Poetry Review, Literary Hub, and Adroit Journal. Her debut collection of poems, Dear God, Dear Bones, Dear Yellow, is forthcoming from Haymarket Books in 2022. She was recently selected as one of the 2021 Ruth Lilly and Dorothy Sargent Rosenberg Poetry Fellows. You can visit her website at noorhindi.com, and you can follow her on Twitter, both of which I will drop into the chat right now. And so as creative writers, this is your opportunity to ask her any questions about the writing experience, the writing world, publishing, the ins and out of it. And so I'm going to turn the mic to Noor. Noor, take it.
Wow, thank you so much, Pega, for that beautiful introduction. Thank you, Scott. And I love the shout out to your creative writing classrooms. That was awesome. I really, really appreciate all of you taking the time to be here and listen and ask questions and interact. It's a really, really excellent. I'm in Michigan right now and it's 7 o'clock, and this is just the perfect evening of poetry. And so I do want to encourage the students, please feel free to ask questions. Please feel free to reach out. Please be as interactive as you can. I love working with writers and talking about writing, and so let me know. And so today I was thinking I'd read some poems. I'd talk a little bit about where writing has taken me the last few years. This year specifically has been a really good year for writing for me. And so I'm happy to sort of just share some of my experiences with y'all and some poems. And yes, I see that Pika has updated and put my email address in there. Yeah, please feel free to reach out. Like I said, I love talking about poems with anyone, and I am starving for good conversations these days. So let me know. So I'm going to start out, I'm going to read a little bit from the manuscript that's coming out with Haymarket Books, which was really kind of funny because I'd originally had in my bio that the book was coming out in 2023, and I'd asked to have that updated because I was giving everybody the wrong date and we eventually got that updated. So that was really great. So I'll read I'll start with a lighter poem, and we'll see where the evening takes us. There's parts of this book that I was working on where I was really experimenting with a little bit of humor and trying to give the book a little bit more of a light touch. So here is a poem I'll share. Broken light bulb flickering away. Every week I fall in love with a new bad idea. I hope one day to magic my body away. I wish for everyone to leave me alone and talk to me at once. Please forgive me. All I've ever wanted is to be the poet laureate of flaming hot Cheetos. All my desires go unnoticed. On my birthday, I visit a fortune teller. She tells me, beware of the J. Jackhammers, joylessness, jukeboxes, white men named Jason, Jesus. There is so much junk in my brain. My father escaped war, and here I am, the perfect immigrant child. I assimilate so much, I drink Diet Coke at the rate of a middle-aged white woman. My mother wanted me to be a writer. My mother wanted to be a writer. I should hold her sacrifices, but instead sob into a donut decorated like the US flag at 3 a.m. My cat is tired of my antics. My parents named me Light because their lives lie in shadow, but I'm a poor example of joy. Sometimes I get so sad, I think about eating a quesadilla or assembling a tire swing or taking off my bra. Instead, I dream of the big, dumb heart my mother hands me. She tells me to carry it. I drop it every time. So thank you again. It wasn't long ago that I think in a lot of ways, my love of writing started in an introduction to poetry class that I was taking at the University of Akron. And it was sort of this moment in my life where I was really, I was stuck. I was trying to figure out if I wanted to continue pursuing a teaching education. And I was also doing reporting at that time. And I was taking these creative writing classes at the university and trying to figure out which route to take. And I landed in this poetry class where we were reading these amazing poems and poets that I fell in love with. And I'll name drop a couple of people during this time to like give y'all some recommendations of books that really brought me into writing, and especially the joys of reading and books that are I think friendlier to younger writers sometimes too. And I was really sort of struck in these books by how seen I was feeling while reading these poems. One of those is Tarfia Fayzulah's Seam. And I remember her describing in one of the poems in that book, and I can't recall which poem this is, where she describes the sound of the adhan, right? The call to prayer in the Middle East that sometimes goes off, and goes off 5 times a day actually. And I remember feeling like, oh, like I know that sound and I can hear it in my head, and I feel I feel at one with this poet and with this text in a way that I had never really felt with texts, right? I think if you grow up as a person of color in this country, that you don't see yourself a lot in the writing that you're reading in classrooms, but poetry gave me an avenue into that in a really cool way. And then I ended up actually leaving teaching. I didn't want to pursue that, and I ended up just pursuing my English degree. And I don't say just to undermine it. It's because I realized that that is the thing that felt truest and whole to me at that time, and continues to push me through. So I'll read another poem, and then I will talk some more. And if y'all have any questions throughout about any of this, you should feel free to drop it in the chat. And then after the poems, I'll jump into them. So I will read. I've been writing lately these poems that are specifically about reporting, and right now I am not reporting. I left my job because I burnt out, and also this last week my old magazine died. So anyway, I've been asking this question of what does it mean to report at this time in our country when there's so many problems happening, and what is the point of consuming so much information and witnessing other people's trauma, and how do we write around that, especially if we are being trusted with others' work. And so I started writing these breaking news poems, which have sort of created a pathway into my second book, which I'll talk about later. But here's one of them. Breaking news. We know death is futile. No death as 3.5 thousand retweets, a trauma, a thing named empty, an internet measured in the slow bend of your fingers, clicking the quiet tempo of expiration. Your spleen in the shape of a gun, in the shape of a pen, I am going door to door, collecting story. I place a tape recorder at the edge of a child's stroller and watch her position it between her teeth, chew on story, and argue she's agent of her own story. I dream of America as nightmare, as child placing drone in mouth, as mother placing drone in child's mouth to condition her tongue to the taste of America. I see you. Door to door in eviction court I attend, and a judge asks to see my face, so I show her my blood at the edge of survival, an audience of witness of whiteness. Sir, why are you being evicted? Which system, what history? I know your trauma is a thing we'll name. Breaking news, your trauma, a hunger we crave, your trauma behind a paywall, your trauma we measure with clicks. I document futility. To feed America more story muddled by story, there is a child crying in front of a pink wall as her home is demolished in Palestine. It moves one to tears to watch your own reflection on a screen. Your face in anguish at another's pain looks so sweet, almost heroic. So I graduated with my master's in poetry in the middle of the pandemic in May of 2020, and I launched into a full-time reporting career. And that was the first time that I ever really invested a substantial amount of time doing this sort of work. And I reported on evictions during the pandemic, and I was watching all of these eviction hearings occur in court, despite a lot of people in the country believing that evictions were on hold, right? And it was really chilling watching the system play out in such a way, in such a small level of this one court in this one city in America, and the ways in which you can reduce humans and their experiences into numbers and cases, and really complicated language and how you can sort of break them apart through these really, really tiny rules, right? And it made me really depressed actually for a while, because it was really hard for me to reconcile my position in that as a person who is displaced. My father is a Palestinian refugee. I grew up in a household that was in a lot of ways broken, and with a father who never felt at home anywhere, and I never felt at home anywhere. And to watch people systemically lose their homes at the height of a health crisis in this country, a continued health crisis, was really, really difficult. And I really questioned my place as a writer for a long time, and continue to question, if I have to be honest with y'all. And so I've been playing with those ideas for a while, and just sort of thinking about that. So I'll read actually another breaking news poem. I'm losing my train of thought sometimes because I'm watching the chat, and it's actually really great. I'll read another breaking news poem, and then I'll change course and read something a little bit lighter. Breaking news. We'll wake up Sunday morning and read the paper, read each other, become consumers of each other's stories, a desperate reaching for another body's warmth. It's words taking us through a world. We carry graveyards on our backs, and I'm holding a lightning bug hostage in one hand. Its light dimming in the warmth of my fist, and in the other, a pen to document its death. Isn't that terrible? I'll ask you, shutting my fist once more. In interviews, I frame my subject stories through a lens to make them digestible to consumers. I become a machine, a transfer of information. They become a plea for empathy. An oversaturation of feelings will fail at transforming into action. What's lost is incalculable. And at the end of the summer, the swimming pools will be gutted of water, and it'll be impossible to swim. Thank you all so much for listening. So I want to change course for a second, and I know you're all perhaps maybe, and I don't want to speak for anybody, but starting off in writing and maybe taking your first creative writing class as I was 6 years ago, I guess that would be, yeah, 6 years ago. It wasn't that long ago. It was not that long ago. And talk about a writing tip that I carry with me. So something I believe in is that you don't have to write every day. Something that used to really torture me as when I was beginning writing is this idea that you had to write every single day in order to succeed as a writer. And I disagree with that wholeheartedly. I think that's a very privileged way of looking at writing. If we were all these really famous artists making 6 figures off a book, then perhaps we could afford to only write. But that's not the case for a lot of people who are parents and who have full-time jobs. And for me, I think that the best writing advice I ever got is from one of my writing professors, Mary Bittinger, who said, sometimes the pot is really full, right? And you're beaming with all of this energy to write, and you're cranking out all these poems. And sometimes the pot is empty and you have to find other ways to write. And we can be creative with thinking about how we write. Writing is not just sitting down with a pen and paper. It can also be engaging with other writers. It can also be reading. It can also be having a conversation with somebody about your work. It can be taking a walk through a park because maybe that day your mental health really needs it, and that's what gets you thinking a little bit. It could be taking a shower, a long shower, and just being with yourself and your body for a few minutes. And so I really think that find that space and that rhythm for yourself and stick with that, and do hold yourself accountable. But writing should not be a painful process. I think there can be a lot of joy in it, and we can all really, if you come into it with joy and playfulness and a sense of lightness, I think your head will feel so much calmer and ready to like go into those tougher subjects. And yes, totally agreeing with you, Hannah, that it should never feel forced. As soon as I feel like I'm forcing it, like put the pen down, it's okay. You're going to produce your best work when you are at your best. And you can only be your best if you're taking care of yourself. So I'll read another poem, and then we can launch into some questions maybe, or I can read more poems. We'll see. I can't believe it's only been like 22 minutes. So, okay. I will read. I was talking about the sound of the adhan earlier, that I was really struck by in Tarfia Fizulah's book. And here's a poem that I think I wrote this poem actually right after I read Seam. Thirst. Amman was a broken railing I tried to lean on, and the adhan was a song I tried to love. That summer, I was little and terrified of God, my lust hanging from the roots of my hair. What did I know of hunger, which moved at the speed of fingers exploring a body I wanted to be mine? I remember my grandmother tapping her feet during iftar, say Alhamdulillah, say I am thankful for the sunlight, the sorrow, the summer, which is endless and tastes like a heat. After iftar, I would hold her hand, let her guide me to the women's mosque where dirt lined the soles of their feet, their hands clutching prayer beads, eyes with us and not. I longed for that softness and surrender, which I mistook for faith. Oh Allah, I never found you in those spaces. Oh Allah, it's true, I turned selfish. Years later, and wanted to fuck her, drank to drink and get drunk until I was brave and no longer a girl wiping my teeth with pages of the Quran. When morning came, one of us spent hours washing her hands in an ocean of bleach. The other stumbled into a mosque for the first time in years and howled at Allah for creating appetites and tongues for lungs that inhale so much of this world. Thanks for listening. So there's been a lot of ways. I know that the subject of this, and perhaps we can talk more about it, is this idea of poetry or art as a means of social justice, right? Or as a means of protest. And I really, really feel passionately about that idea, because I do think our writing matters. I do think our words matter. When I was reporting, it was always this, I always felt like a gatekeeper, right? People would come to us with their stories, or we would go to them with their stories. And then we sort of had to be that thing between them telling their story the way they wanted to tell it. You had to put it in this sort of format, right? In a headline and a lead, and have an image. And when it comes to writing poetry or stories or fiction, you are the agent of your story. And I love that so much, because nowhere else and no other writing form, not in reporting, can you be the author of that. And I grew up in America post 9/11, where white reporters were often telling the story of what it meant to be Muslim in America, of what being Muslim looked like, of these images of the Middle East as war-torn and impoverished and violent. And if you grew up in a household in America, or even in the Middle East, you knew that wasn't true, that wasn't the only image. And but it was really difficult, and it's still sometimes really difficult to find those stories that feel true by people who are actually living in those places and here. And so, yes, you are the agent of your own story. I'm loving these comments. Thank you guys. I'll read one more. I actually will read this one where I was playing with a little bit of form in this. This is a little bit also about the news. I talk a lot about the news in my writing, just because I grew up in a household also where my father religiously watched Al Jazeera. And so the news was constantly this thing that was in the background of our lives. And when I got older and became a reporter in an industry that literally headlines Palestinians as dead constantly, we are always talked about in the past tense. That put me in a strange place and I think moved me more toward poetry, because I could write a different sort of narrative and one that felt truer of what being Palestinian means. Here's a poem, and it's written as like a multiple choice question poem, I guess. I don't know how to describe it. In which the white woman on my thesis defense asks me about witness. Number 1, and what does it mean to witness yourself on television dying? A, I no longer watch the news. B, I've exhausted every mirror in my home searching for my eyes. C, I mean to talk about the intersection between a knife and the flip side of a mirror. 2, might we define this as a collective trauma? A, whose trauma? B, a gathering of bodies might be called a circus to some and a graveyard to others. C, I cannot exactly describe what this is. My mind sharpens to salted lemons. 3, when you speak to your father about the politics surrounding witness, does he move beyond geography? A, I never cared for maps. B, my mother used to warn me, God is watching, your grandfather is watching, your father is watching. Their eyeballs a static screen, shut off, I scream. C, whose geography? 4, tell us about spectacle. A, you pleasure that which makes us fiction while staring into our graved eyes. B, my mother walking through Macy's. C, the intuitive desire to laugh at racist jokes is what my body might recognize as survival. 5, do you believe in America? A, believe is sister to memory and to love and to cheer and to trust. There are drones outside the doors of America. Who will catch them? B, who is the audience for this question? C, before burial, the hearse brought my grandfather's body to our home in Akron, Ohio. Through a window, I watched the hearse take 2 laps around our block, then followed its license plate to disappearance. Thank you. Someone asked, do you have poems about your homeland? So I do write about Palestine. I try to be very careful because the reason that I am in this country is because of colonization, because I cannot be at my homeland right now, right? But also I've never been there and I've never visited, and I only know Palestine through my father and my father's grief about it and what I see is in the news, right? So I'm very careful about how I write about it and my position in some ways of privilege and also in some ways of directly not being able to be in Palestine. I will read a quick one though about Palestine. Palestine is a woman, a child in a thobe, olive pits in my hands, tatris on my grandmother's scarf. Is 34 Palestinians killed? We don't wake up. American politicians, occupied country, Israel has the right to defend itself. Ahid Tamimi, ice cream on tongue, flavor unknown. Are you grateful your parents came to this country? 300 dead, open air prison, 10-year blockade, Razian al-Najjar, accidental bullet. Pomegranate, so bloody, my grandmother, born 10 days before Nakba, gunpowder in our blood. Stop killing us. Stop telling us how to fight. Is grape mint hookah, country I've never visited, woman, body bruised and policed, is queer as fuck, the patriarchy, is 300,000 Palestinians killed, my father crying, to Umayma al-Khalil, sweet black tea, fresh mint stuck on the roof of my mouth, two-state solution. We thought the house was empty, a stranger living in my great-grandfather's home, eating the pomegranates he once planted. So how do you say your name again? Is Palestinians killed, sunflowers on their graves, seeds we crack between our teeth, spitting out each shell before digging another grave. Thank you so much for, you guys are carrying me through this, and I really appreciate it. So I do want to talk about some writers who influenced me. I did want to mention, so Tommy Pico, two Native American poets, Tommy Pico and Layli Long Soldier. Their books are amazing, brilliant. Tommy's work actually is really interesting because his collection IRL is actually written as a long text, and I love seeing poets who are playing with a lot of different forms. I think it's really fascinating, and I think it shows the just boundlessness of what you can do with poetry and how it can look, and also all the ways that if you are somebody who is quote unquote marginalized in this country or made marginalized in this country, all the ways that you can take up space in these pages and in your pages in the work that you're writing. I love Layli Long Soldier's work. I love Claudia Rankine's work. Her poems have been carrying me, I feel like, the last few years of my life. Tarfia Fayzullah's work. There's so many I could name. And if anyone wants poetry collections, recommendations, I'm happy to like send you a list. There's a list that I just keep in my inbox that I like to send people. But someone actually, when I was playing with a little bit more humor in my work that I really love, that I think doesn't get a lot of attention, and I'm going to actually find his, is Jeffrey McDaniel. I love, where is his? And it's a really cool cover. So if you look up The Endarkenment by Jeffrey McDaniel, it has this really cool cover. And the poems are sort of, they use humor a lot, but they're also really, really sad. And his writing style is, I don't think we talk enough. And I think he just released a new book, Holiday in the Islands of Grief. So I'd like to see that. I would be happy to answer some questions if y'all will be brave enough to ask them.
Noor, there's a great question by
sure.
Hannah. When did you first know you wanted to be a writer? What was your aha moment? I love that.
Ooh, I love that. So my intro to writing actually came out of a lot of grief. I lost my closest cousin when I was 15, and it was really, really difficult. And I didn't have a lot of people that I could talk to about that grief and that loss. My parents did not, and my family were very like, that's what God chose. This is, her fate. And I really felt like that wasn't enough for me. And that's when I started writing, and it sort of just exploded out of me. And the page was really the only place where that would fit, that could fit all of my emotions in some coherent ways. And I think that was my aha moment of just being able to write and be with myself in these notebooks and create my own sort of home and a place where what I was feeling could like be seen and could actually matter in some sort of way. And it was in that. And I still actually, I had this habit in high school of, I always carried this like notebook, and I still buy these like little composition notebooks, and I just like go at it and free write in them. It's still like a constant practice in my life. And it's actually funny because I never, I write so quickly that I sometimes can't even read my handwriting in these notebooks, but I think it's more of the act of just expelling a feeling or a thought than making any sense. And I think it's an important writing tool too, because if I open up a Word document, I get so concerned with like everything making sense and everything being beautiful. And when I'm in the notebook, I get to just screw around with it and write without thinking and without the editor. Someone in the notebook, yeah, it gets to stay raw for sure. There was a question: do you find humor is something you'd be able to translate your emotions with? I'm not sure what you're asking, Mario. Do you find humor is something you'd be able to translate your emotions with? Oh, I guess and let me know if I'm not answering the right question, but I think you're asking is this humor something that you're able to use as a tool to get your emotions across? Definitely. And I also think it's a really powerful tool for getting readers into the work. So poetry is, and no one wants to say this, but poetry is scary, right? Like there's this idea that like it's poems with like a capital P, and we all like think of like Shakespeare or these really serious, sad poets that we don't understand what the hell they're saying. And there's always this like underlying meaning, right? That like we have to dig at. And if we don't know what it is, then like we're stupid, right? So I think like a lot of people grow up to believe that poetry is this really scary thing, but which is why I like to use humor in the work as a way to sort of welcome somebody in and disarm the reader before they enter the poem, so that they can actually receive the language and the message of the poem. And also, I'm not a very funny person, but I think I'm a very silly person. And it's a way of coping. And I think it's needed. I think we have to laugh at ourselves. I think we have to see ourselves a little bit as characters. And yeah, and make light of all of the like hardships that are happening sometimes, because otherwise how else to survive, right? Like we have to eat our flaming hot Cheetos and reward ourselves with Sour Patch Kids and laugh with our friends, because that's how you survive this world, frankly. Thank you so much, Nikki, for your kind comments. And yeah, am I missing any questions, Pika?
So
I hope that
Nikki,
answered your questions, Mario. Your question, Mario.
Nikki asked a really good question. She says, "Hi, Noor. My name is Nikki and I'm a student of Professor Pega's. I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm loving every second of this. This is probably off topic, but I was wondering what your personality type is. It's fine if you don't know. I just feel like you have such an introspective personality. It's amazing. Your poems gave me so much insight on your culture, and I'm sorry you had to go through what you went through. I'm so glad you found your peace through writing. Stay strong." So I guess, Nora, I'm hearing her ask, can you tell us a little bit about maybe not your own personality, but how does like a writer's personality or maybe your personality play a role in your writing, in your poetry, in your reporting? Do you ever think about that?
I actually don't. So if you're asking about Myers-Briggs, I don't know. I feel like every time I take that stupid test, I get different letters, which I think that is actually pretty indicative of being a Gemini. So I was born on June 21st, which is the summer solstice. And I think I'm on the Gemini Cancer cusp. So I don't know how my personality, I think every poet bleeds into their work, right? I think for a while I was obsessed with this idea of like voice, and how do you get your voice? How do you establish your voice? And what does that mean? And um I think that's bullshit. Like, you don't need one voice, right? Like, we all have multiple ways of looking at the world and multiple ways of responding to the world. And there's this idea that a poet or a writer must have one consistent voice. And I struggled with this when I was writing the first book because I was in the MFA and I knew I had to get this like thesis out that was going to become my first book. And I was writing these really serious poems about Palestine. And they were full of grief, and I was writing these sillier poems about like just fucking being sad, right? Like just being sad and dealing with sadness and operating in this country with that sadness and what that means. And then I was writing these poems about that were really difficult to write, about violence that women face in my community. And those poems were that should have really been the most serious. I ended up really using a lot of humor in those because there was so much shame entrenched in that subject. And that was a way to really bring people into the poems without turning them off. Because the moment anybody hears the word like feminism, it's like it just goes over their head, right? And they think it's this like terrible thing. And so I was trying when I was working on the book to put these like three very disparate voices into one book under one umbrella, and it like was not working. And I think my thesis committee was trying to like put these voices into one book. And then at some point when I was putting it together, I was like, I'm not going to put it into one voice. Like, all of these poems and all of these versions of my voices are me, and they can live in this book. And I don't know what that speaks to my personality, but to say maybe like I'm just very inconsistent and a little ADHD, which is, cool. But also like, I also don't want to read a book that has like one level of like voice or thought. So I hope that answered the personality question.
I think it did, Noor. So folks, we're going to go ahead and just open it up so that you can just raise your hand, unmute yourself, and we want to hear your voices. Originally, we kind of wanted to be a little bit cautious and, prevent Zoom bombers, but I'm feeling the vibe. And so go ahead and raise your hands. I will call on you. We can hear your voice. You can ask your questions. So Alessandro and Tratan, if you guys wanted to raise your hands, I'll call on you and then you can ask your questions yourself.
Oh, sweet. I love this.
Yeah.
I wish somebody would Zoom bomb this. We'll just bully them out.
No, they're a nightmare. But Alessandro, go ahead.
Hi. So yeah, I've really enjoyed all your poems and being exposed to your inspirations and a little bit of your journey. But I was just curious, it's kind of two questions in one, but I was wondering if like how being published has maybe changed your outlook on writing, and also how has your voice evolved through this new era of writing?
Well, that's a really great question. I'll start with the first one. And so how has being published? I published pretty young. I had a professor in the MFA who would always tell me to slow down and to take my time with my work. And now I think I probably should have listened to her, because there's some work online that I would perhaps prefer that it maybe wasn't. But also, I don't know if at the same time, it feels more honest to have that work up there. Like, I think it's cool to see an artist's journey. I think it's cool to see an artist's mistakes. And I think it's cool to just see us as humans who are also like muddling through this shit with you, right? Like, we're not these like internet personality stars. We're also like approaching the blank page with as much fear. And so I don't know how it changed me. I think I'm more careful these days with what goes online. I think it gave me eyes on my work and a sense of community that I didn't have before. That is probably number one. The coolest thing in the world is when you publish something and somebody from a completely different part of the country or the world responds to you and says, I felt this, and you feel like just a tiny little fraction of yourself become a little bit less alone. And I think that's the coolest thing. And how has it evolved since? I think I've became a lot bolder. I felt a lot of pressure when I was in the MFA to only write about Palestine, or only to write about like racial trauma. And that was like, I think that was like white people wanting to read about racism to feel better about themselves a little bit, right? Because like I think there's a way that like writers of color and queer writers get pigeonholed in only writing about identity. And as the years have gone by, I've become bolder about like just writing silly little poems about like I said, like being sad, or like having joy with my friends, or all of the things that don't have to do, and also have to do with all of the messy politics of like living in this country that we're all entrenched in. I hope that answered your question, Alessandro.
Yeah, thank you. I enjoy hearing it, and thank
Yeah.
you.
Traton asks a really good question, Noor. He says, is writing as a reporter harder than poetry? And how do you motivate yourself to write news?
Whew, yeah, it's harder. I think it's harder in different ways. Like poetry, I have to come to the page with a lot of vulnerability, and there is a way in which that has become a lot more difficult during the pandemic, because I think I became a lot more like closed off, and it was like there was this point where I was so overwhelmed with everything that was happening that I felt like if I touched base with my feelings that I would just like, like melt, and like lose my mind. And so for a long time, and I think I'm honestly still in this place where I'm still really overwhelmed, and I've taken a step back from the writing. And I've had to like I have to like lean now into retraining myself to connect with myself on that level again, because I haven't been there for a minute. And with reporting, it's difficult in the sense of somebody is like sitting with you who might be from a really vulnerable community, and they're telling you their story, and they're being very honest with you and very brave, and you now have to like shoulder that and tell their story in a way that's responsible and ethical and kind, and not in a way that exploits their story, right? And I think that's the difficult thing, is like, how do we not exploit people's stories for profit, or for whatever ways that we feel like storytelling will somehow like help a social problem? I'm not saying it won't help a social problem, but it's just that like there's ways that storytelling becomes a little bit abusive sometimes. And that was the thing that was most difficult to navigate with reporting. And I don't know how one navigates or like continues doing reporting. I burnt out of it around July. I quit. And I'm trying to figure out how to go back into it, or if I want to go back into it, or what that looks like. So I don't know how to answer that question, frankly. If you figure it out, let me know, because that's it was hard leaving, and I'm still trying to live with that decision.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible how writing can become such a strong part of our identity,
Yeah.
our physical bodies, our minds, and our spirits. It definitely is. It's not like like a task that you just kind of go do. We're not
Yeah.
robots. So I feel that, Noor. Ava, you had your hand up earlier. Do you want to unmute and ask a question or make a comment?
My question was kind of similar to Trayson's, but I can ask it anyway if you can answer it.
Sure.
I was just wondering that because you said you're kind of talking about it a bit just now, but you said that like reporting felt like gatekeeping, and I was just wondering how like you think poetry overcomes like writing about maybe current events or just like personal stories.
How does poetry overcome writing about current events or personal stories? Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Why should it, I guess, overcome?
I guess they're just like when you said like with reporting, I just feel like news maybe is just more like you have to like make it for certain people, it feels like.
No,
Like
that
it
makes
has to be digestible, yeah.
Yeah, and like with poems, I think there is like a thing where you kind of start to like want to respond to every little thing in your poems. And I don't know how to get out of that, other than I had somebody who was constantly hitting me over the head with the advice of read dead poets. And I sort of agree. Like I had this like almost I didn't want to read dead poets. I didn't want to read a lot of dead poets. I was sick of the dead poets because that's what I grew up reading, and they were all really boring white men that I didn't care about, frankly. But you sort of, when you read them, you see all the ways that like, first of all, like this lineage of history, that's like all of the poets who've been working before you, and the ways that like how they thought about risk taking in their work. But also I think it's really important to get away from the current era, right? Like, and take a break. Like there was a point where everybody was writing about Trump. Everybody wanted to write the next like poem that was against Trump. And it just got old. It's like this man is not going to matter after like a couple years, right? Like I haven't seen any news about him lately, and like those poems after a couple years they will sort of age out. Like they're not gonna be around forever, and these issues are not going to be around forever. And so it is important sometimes to think outside of the current era, though I will say that like there are some subjects, like we're always going to be dealing with race, we're always going to be dealing with colonialism, we're always going to be dealing with capitalism. There's always going, or I hope not always, but there's for a long time going to be these systems of power and structures that are like over our lives. And I don't think those poems will be out of fashion in a few years, but also who knows, we're all going to be dead, right? So who cares? I don't know if that answered it. I'm sorry, Ava. I really ended that question with "we're all gonna die."
I mean, it's kind of true. So we got to write what we want to write while
I
we're
mean,
here,
just
right?
write, yeah, like write whatever the hell you do, whatever you want. Nobody
Yes.
cares.
Yeah.
Hey, write what
Yeah.
makes you happy and what is the truth for you, and there's no way to be wrong with that. Because none of us are making money out of this,
Yeah.
right?
Nobody cares and everybody cares all at the same time.
Yes. Nobody cares until you say the wrong thing and you get canceled on Twitter. Then everybody
There
cares.
you go. So we have time for one more question. Hannah, I see your hand up. And then after Hannah's question and Noor's response, I want to make a couple of announcements and then we'll shut it down. So Hannah, go ahead and take it.
Hi, Noor.
Hi.
First, I just wanted to say thank you for, sharing bits of your heart and soul with us and affording us this experience. And thank you to the teachers for this opportunity as well.
Ooh.
You've come really far in your journey as a writer, clearly. And what I wanted to ask you is, what advice would you give your younger self just starting to explore the world of writing and delving into what it is? What would you, the you that you are now, tell your younger self?
That's an excellent question. I think I would tell myself to calm the hell down. I think that's what I would say, and to slow down. I remember Carol Pagel, one of my professors, who's always hitting me in the head with this advice, slow down, calm down, stop moving a million miles a second. And I sort of resented her for a long time because I was like, why are you slowing me down? I want to, and there's a way that I think being in school makes you feel like you can only do things when you're in school. But after I graduated with my master's, my life stopped being split up in semesters. And it was almost this really sad, oh shit, I'm just gonna be alive for the next 60 years. And I have all this time to write and to explore and to read. And why did I feel like I was my life was gonna end when I graduated? I couldn't see past graduation day. And just remember that you have time to take that time to explore, to read, and to spend more time resisting people's advice on how you should be writing or what you should be writing about. I spent so much time being concerned with what the rules of the game were than actually just being myself and throwing things on the wall and seeing what sticks and experimenting and being fearless in doing whatever the hell I wanted on the page, right? Sometimes you lose that after a couple of years. You really start thinking about audience too much or editors or what people want. And those first couple of years of getting into poetry are precious. Protect those couple years. Do whatever the hell you want.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I dig that. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Noor.
Yeah.
Noor, your name means light, and you've been such a bright light for us this evening. So we really thank you for being here and responding to my call. And folks in the room, the reason why this event was made possible is because of the FPAC committee. The FPAC committee is Fine and Performing Arts Committee. We have other events similar every semester, so similar events to tonight. So please check out our website. We do need a student rep on that committee. So if you're interested in being a part of the fine arts and literature and writing stuff that's happening on campus, feel free to reach out to me via email. But the FPAC committee is not the only space in which you can explore your best self and your art. We have another incredible space on campus, and I would like to not only thank my sister and my co-conspirator, Caitlin Choi, who is our work-based learning coordinator,
Thank you, Kate.
but I would Yeah, and I would love to also now just give the floor to Caitlin for a few minutes to tell us about not only work-based learning, but Kapwa, which is the other space on campus in which you can explore your creativity, your writing, and everything related to whatever support you need. So, Caitlin.
Hi, thank you so much. Gosh, Kapwa is a learning community for APIA students. And so we've been around for 3 years and we're still in the early stages where you can come in and do really exciting things and we can support you 100%. So I'm also really excited to share that we got a 5-year, $1.5 million grant from U.S. Department of Education to support APIA students. And so some of that funding can go directly towards supporting these similar types of activities and events, fostering more spaces where students can manifest themselves, explore what you want to do for a career, explore your identity, having tough conversations about what it is that your cultural background, and then also celebrating your cultural background. What does it mean to be an APIA in America, being from an immigrant background, and also the intersectionality of gender, race, sexuality, class. There's a lot there. And so we want to create this safe space where you can explore all of that safely, because we all also are trying to unpack that for ourselves too. It's a never ending journey. And so Kapwa is part of this resource that we can help support you in doing that. And so thank you so much for giving me a little bit of time to share what Kapwa is. So you can expect to hear more about that because this is a campus-wide initiative and we're here to make sure that more issues like this are being discussed, that this isn't just going to, pop up every now and then, but that this is the sustained dialogue that we're having on this really important issue. So I am so glad, Noor, that you came and spoke your truth. It can be hard. And so I appreciate how much truth you share with us in a very brave and vulnerable way. And thank you so much, Pega, for your effort to bring Noor here and to allow us to kind of bask in her wisdom and insight.
Absolutely. Thank you, my dear sister, for always supporting us in the background with technology, with planning, and even your insight. So I really appreciate your time as well, Caitlin. Folks, we are at 5:04. We are over our program. Once again, thank you for being here. Thank you again to Professor Scott Starbuck for bringing your class tonight. And yeah, we'll say goodnight, but we won't say goodbye. I dropped our email addresses, so if you want to connect with us on a deeper level, feel free to reach out to us and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
No worries, Noor. It's okay.
Oh yeah, is it Pega, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
No problem at all. No problem.
Thank you for this. Thank you so much. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Caitlin. So let me know if you need anything from me.
We will. And Caitlin, you can go ahead and stop recording, please. Perfect.